Then we're coming to the last three concepts in Eriksen's book about globalization, key concepts. And I've written three concepts plus one. The concepts concerning globalization are mixing, risk, identity, politics. But then he has a last chapter about alter globalization, or glocalization, as he calls it, or has constructed global relocalization, glocalization. Won't talk so much about that. But before I start talking about these concepts, I just want to draw a mind map of how I think these concepts are connected, or could be seen. If we have globalization, we have been talking about the social. And the social being first and foremost this embedding. You can read this, you can imagine it. And mobility, or mobility, which I have called migration, or said we should call migration. And these two are the central concepts of the social aspect of globalization. And migration has speed, standardization and connectedness as part of it. We are now going to talk about the cultural aspect of globalization. And the concepts we are coming to are risk, and mixing, and identity politics. I'll explain how they can be seen as more cultural aspects of globalization. But as a mind map, we have to fill in kind of the we can call it the material, which is technology, which we talked a lot about and which is very central to this, but also nature, and we will come to that. Ecology. When we are going to talk in the last part about challenges, that's central. But technology and the possibilities that technology has created for globalization is strongly affecting the social part. But technology, so what? And the answer to that question is there are social aspects of the possibilities that technology creates for forming new patterns and structures in society. And it's also possibilities for cultural aspects of that. But what kind of social structures and social patterns, and what kind of social cultural patterns that we find, that is not up to us in a sense. It's to be seen, and that is what this is very much about. The last part, the what he calls the alter globalization. It's kind of the forces, the movements, the mobilization against some of, not globalization as such, but the consequences of it, and globalization seen as a cause to some of these consequences. But we'll start by talking about these key concepts, and the main first part is about mixing. Erikson describes mixing with several different concepts, but it is about mixing is about the results of migration, people moving to new localities, new places, and meet people that are different from the people where they came from, in a way. So we can see through history the results of migration being that different people migrated into a common geographical area, kind of created a society together, and that society got a certain, we could call it a certain cultural form. And so eventually it was seen as a kind of homogeneous society, as it could become kind of something that they could share, language, religion, values, norms, and eventually be seen as that, as a homogeneous society or a homogeneous culture. But it could also be staying mixed in a way. The character of the society could be that it was containing many types of cultures. So he talks about kind of cultural, this is the concept, cultural pluralism or multiculturalism, as this several different cultures living beside each other, but also hybridity or creolization, which he calls it, from his experience on field working in Trinidad in the Caribbean, where you kind of mix different. Creole is a mix of local languages and French, I think, and Pidgin is English and local languages in the Pacific. It is creating something new out of very different cultural or language historically that way came together through mixing. He has he makes a small diagram of where he puts similarity and difference as one axe, and then purity and mixing as the other axe. And the corner where you could see similarity and purity, that would be Norway 40, 50 years ago. Pretty much purely Norwegian. One language, one religion, some very local varieties, of course, but a fairly homogeneous national culture. And difference and mixing in the other corner being at least the ideal of the United States, the melting pot. You could have the difference and purity would be several different groups of people living together but not mixing. and one way of that is apartheid. And you could have similarity and mixing that would, I don't know really how that would look, but think about it. This I talk about this. I talk about national culture. I talk about cultural meeting each other and so on. I just want to say that I don't want to essentialize culture. Culture is not a force in a way. It is just the ideas, the values and norms and ways of looking at the world that people carry with them. There are no culture existing outside people's minds and bodies, outside people's existence. So, but we still have a concept of culture, and it makes it a bit easier to think about that in a kind of a common something shared, and it is something shared. The culture is the part of the life world, of the subjective life world that we share, or that is shared collectively. So it's about a collective identity. The second concept, risk, is it was brought up in a very important work by a German sociologist in the 90s called Ulrich Beck on risk society, or maybe it was in the 80s even. It was his way of trying to catch the kind of, not the essence, since we didn't want to essentialize things here, but an important aspect, a trend in temporary German society, but also in European society and in Western society, about the conception of risk. We have become really obsessed with risk, or I might say really obsessed. We are so concerned with risk. And one possibility of explaining that may be that we think we can control it. And we have worked for a couple of centuries, I would say, or since the 19th century, the second half of the 19th century, and the feeling of getting to control the world. And that came with a mastering of technology that was what's new, and we can say that was really the start of modernity, or the real development of modernity. And so this, but that wasn't only the technology; it was in several ways. And there is a excellent Canadian philosopher of science called Yin Hacking that has written about statistics. Statistics is not that old; it's a couple of 100 years, and his book is called The Taming of Chance, which was the development of population statistics to be able to foresee some big, not only changes, but also patterns in the population. And so this kind of feeling that we can control, that we, if we can see the risks, we can put in measures to control it, or someone can, the politicians can. That has become quite an important aspect of our public debate and of how we relate to things. Two major risks that we have seen over the last years and or recognized over the last years are global warming, of course, and the ecological challenges, the risks that comes with global warming and the development of the ecological system. The other thing which is very visible is terrorism, and that is an interesting part of the risk, because it contains also some kind of notion of, it was political scientist or historian called Huntington at Harvard University that back in the 60s called it the clash of civilizations, the big meeting of great civilizations, and he was referring to the Western civilization and the mainly Middle Eastern or the Muslim, the Islamic part of civilization. And that has been reinforced with conflicts that can be codified as a conflict between Western liberal society and this Islamic traditional society. We can discuss, and I wouldn't really vouch for the accuracy of that analysis, but it's important still because it is used in public debate, in mass media, to codify some of the conflicts we see and some of the risks we run, and it's obviously have an impact on discussions about immigration and discussions about the risks of mixing. But the last part here is identity politics, and it's kind of the other key concept that risk and mixing are aspects of. And identity politics, and Eriksen in the beginning of the chapter quotes another sociologist, a Polish/English sociologist called Zygmunt Bauman, and he says that identity politics is a kind of a paradox, in the sense it's trying to re-embed something that is in the process of disembedding. It's trying to put things a bit back, embed things in not necessarily a locality, but into something known, maybe a cultural pattern that is known. And that is where Eriksen phrases this word, or maybe he has it from someone, I think he has it from someone, the globalization, the global localization or relocalization of globalization, or whatever we want to say. This is quite central. Identity politics are many things, but it is quite central to, let me see what I wrote about that. To the in political mobilization of minority groups, and it has been very important for indigenous people that was there first and has been marginalized by immigrants or invaders, whatever you want to call it. But also slow immigration or movement of other groups. In Norway, we have in the northern part of Norway and Sweden and Finland and Russia, the Samis, which is a Mongolian people that probably migrated into this northern part of Scandinavia and Russia at the same time as the Germanic tribes came from the south 10,000 years ago or something like that. But it has been, it became a minority in northern Norway throughout the centuries. And but since the late 60s, it was a political movement revitalizing the identity and the identity politics, and kind of using that to say that it is our right as Samis to with the Sami identity comes rights to land and resources that we used to have but have been deprived from over historical development of time by Norwegians. It's kind of parallel political identity politics and mobilization of indigenous people in the US and Canada. The Indians or First Nation or Native Americans, they are called and call themselves different things. But it's also similar things tried out in other parts of the world, and in India and in parts of Southeast Asia. You have the hill tribes in the northern parts of these southeastern countries, the Asian countries, that try to claim special rights through their indigenous identity. And India as a state has not recognized anyone as indigenous. They call them tribal. Because they don't want to kind of buy into the global and globalized. It's become a part of the globalization of politics that indigenous gives particular rights. The last chapter in Eriksen's book is about what he calls alter globalization, or glocalization, or global relocalization, as we would say. That is he talks there about kind of movements that go partly against globalization, but can also be seen as part of the general localization. And I think he mentions several types of this. The two interesting types and important types are the re-embedding of groups of people, or relocalizing people's environment. How can I explain that? It's kind of countering the disembedding, in the sense that when we are lifted out of the local social context, we move into a new social context, and that social context is different. It's mixed. It's more, of course, determined by these global tendencies, by the technology, by the social media. We have movements to try to strengthen the locality again. And so identity politics is a very important part of that. But also we see kind of nationalistic movements that want to reinforce the they often want to reinforce national culture, which isn't really possible anymore. But part of it also is about reinforcing the national state and the power of the national state. And that is politically interesting, and that is something we are very concerned with in Europe at the moment, with the Brexit and with the kind of the crisis that the European Union may be seen to be in, and the possibilities of regulating global capitalism, which is seen as very hard to control. And that is the other part, the anti-globalization movement that addresses the injustice that global capitalism, the economics of globalism, results in, the consequence of it. Increasing inequality. They address the injustice or the unfairness and the possibility of kind of balancing towards a type of fairness through regulating politics is very difficult. And so we have some political movements, and they are kind of not anti-global. They are more anti-injustice or inequality. There are big movements of NGO, of non-governmental organizations, the Global Social Forum, which is one of the networks. It's a lot of networks of NGOs working globally to counter the injustice that global capitalism creates. But it's also more local or national movements. We've seen in the US the Occupy Wall Street movement. And we have seen maybe less organized, but big demonstrations over the last 10 or 15 years against the globalized, the free trade, World Trade Organization's meetings and so on. So, to sum up, I would go back to my mind map and say the way that Erikson approaches this, which I think is a very fruitful way of approaching it, is through key concepts, and his key concept to globalization, as I see it, he doesn't sum it up in the same way, but I see the disembedding as kind of the key concept here. That is the aspect of globalization that really are changing our lives in a way. And the other one is identity politics, or kind of supporting that, or building up under the understanding of disembediment is identity politics and mobility or migration. And the other concepts are supporting these three central concepts, I think, in many ways. And my mind map is to understand that. Technology is a main driving force, but it's also creating some kind of material challenges, which we come to, but the social and political challenges will also be apparent when we go on. But first, we now go on to lecture 2, which will be about global health.